And
Hello.
hello.
Hi,
Oh,
Gaspar. How are you?
fine, fine. Nice to see you.
Nice to
Um,
see you too.
uh, are you joining from Berlin, or I've seen in your or LinkedIn profile that you are from Berlin, or are you?
I am from the UK originally, but I'm based in Berlin these days.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Very good. So you
Whereabouts are
are.
you?
I'm from Budapest, so same time
Ah,
zone as
okay.
you. So probably you are also after lunch. I'm just imagining that what would be the situation if you would be in a real in a real conference, and probably you were queuing up to the food. Which food would you
Exactly.
prefer? Would you go to the veg food, or what is your preference typically in a
Oh,
conference?
good question. I'd probably go for something like healthier. I feel like if I have too much before going back into like a talk, then I get too sleepy.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Same to me.
But
I
how was
typically eat much more than I supposed to or I should. And yeah, but usually the healthy stuff, there are usually less queues anyway, so that's
Mhm.
anyway more practical.
Yeah, true.
So so when I was seeing that you will be my conversation partner in this session, I was really glad because so I don't know how you would call yourself, like a UX expert, design expert, or what would be your own title
Yeah,
from
I
this?
think I always say that I spent the last 13 years working in user experience design of some form. And the last few years, I've been more focused on design leadership and team management and being able to drive more positive experiences for people. So I think that's probably like the high level overview of where I'm at right now.
Very good, very good. Because so I was really glad to see that because I think many of us, including myself, are in this position that I absolutely amazed if something is nice and usable, or if it's
Hmm.
good or good looking or whatever. And but it's in many cases too far from me. I It's somewhat mysterious how these things are getting, and what
Hmm.
makes software better usable. When I was studying in the university, we had a software ergonomy lecture, and they were trying to give us some hints and some rules, but those were too oversimplistic, and definitely
Mm.
wasn't the trick, wasn't making the trick. And that's what I wanted to ask you. And when I was also seeing that you are doing this kind of design workshop, which is even more
Mm.
exciting for me, that how can
Hmm.
you do a design workshop, and what does that mean, and who can participate on such a workshop, and what is the outcome of such a workshop? That's really interesting for me. And I thought that
Yeah.
I get the opportunity to ask someone who is in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think in terms of how do you approach or how do these like designs, these screens come to be on somebody's device? I think it can be through a variety of different ways, but I tend to try and just focus really on like the purpose of like what we're creating. I think it comes back to problem solving as well. Like I noticed in your last conversation as well, that you were talking a bit more about problem solving and groups coming together to be able to solve problems for like customers or users together. And I think that's where things like design workshops come in as well, because we often work in kind of separate disciplines, and we're quite specific as to the disciplines that we identify ourselves with. So I would say, like, I work in user experience design, and then someone else might say that they work in engineering. Someone else might say that they're working specifically in analytics. Um, and I think it's really interesting how that identification almost with different disciplines can mean that we create that separation between ourselves as opposed to kind of seeing ourselves as like a group of product makers. And I think we're through design thinking workshops and design sprints and things like that. Like it's amazing to be able to facilitate different groups coming together from different perspectives, and to be as one coming up with ideas. Like everyone's ideas are equal. Typically, you start these design workshops with giving an overview of like any insight you have over what the business is trying to achieve, or insight you have from connecting with customers, or insights that you have from the market positioning and where maybe this particular product that you're working on sits in the market. Brings everyone together to kind of I guess, unite a solid understanding, so everybody's kind of on the same level, and then to work together on, okay, what's the problem that we're solving, and then like, how will we know when we've solved that problem? So there's say one of our customers is having a particular problem with something, what change in their behavior will indicate that we have solved that problem for them? And like, to go through that way of like building our KPIs, as opposed to, I don't know, another way which is purely defined from a business perspective. So I find, design workshops could be really, really helpful for like bringing different groups of people together to work collectively on the same problem. And I think it really changes mindsets. It's really interesting to see how interactions between people change as well. You go from like maybe a product owner who's maybe a bit more authoritarian, for instance, actually being like, hey, like, I didn't know about that, maybe we could talk more about that together. So I think it's really interesting doing that. Is that something you've experienced at all before?
No, I mean, definitely not in this form. And typically obviously I have been participating in some discussions where there have been design as a topic, but usually on those conversations, I remained silent because I always felt that I don't, that was my feeling, the internal feeling is that I don't have that kind of creativity for that. And I feel like if obviously I can make some comments, but those comments are based on my own experience. So that just to give you an example, let's imagine that I have always been using whatever drop-down boxes. Then I will suggest drop-down boxes. I would never get to a checkbox or whatever else. So that I always had a fear that I just block the creativity of someone else that maybe have that. But maybe is it working like that? That because it's a group effort and that's why these kind of problems don't come up, or?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, actually, because I find the more different disciplines are involved, the more diverse the ideas. And especially like when I first started running these kind of workshops, and we started off doing it mainly with designers and researchers and product specialists or product strategists. And as we started to involve more like front-end engineers, back-end engineers, like the diversity of ideas really opened up. And what we found especially is from the engineering side, that a lot of developers in our team would come up with ideas that we didn't know about, like especially maybe we were working specifically with the Android and iOS platforms, and maybe like a new OS has been released and it's got all these new features, and it might be something where our engineers are closer to that than our designers, and they might say, hey, like actually this thing has just come out on the Android platform, and it's something that we could use really, really nicely here. And it's actually, a reasonably quick win for whatever it is, whatever problem we're trying to solve for our customers. So I find it's actually really diversifies the topic, but it's interesting that because say, and anybody who's working in the engineering space doesn't see themselves as a creative, that it's actually harder. And something I've done in the past, so we've had, at the beginning, we would say, we would kind of pose the problem that we're solving and ask everybody to sketch solutions, to sketch screens in a flow maybe that they think might help us to solve the problem. And there were some people who aren't used to kind of sketching and drawing and are less comfortable with that. Which definitely means that those designers who are used to sketching and drawing all the time create these beautiful solutions. And then someone else who doesn't have that experience can put the same thing up on the wall and say, maybe we do a voting session, and actually one idea which is visually more pleasing gets more votes than the other one which is less pleasing. So something I've done in the past as well is to be able to kind of give rules as to what we should be using, even something as small as we're going to sketch with a thick black pen versus a pencil. The stuff that is sketched with the thick black pen gets the attention, and the stuff with the pencil doesn't. There's all these kind of small things make a huge difference, I think, in terms of like how ideas are perceived. And I think in order to encourage people to feel more comfortable with that, what I often say is like, if you don't want to sketch, you don't have to sketch, but make your idea clear. And I think even just by putting a word in a box, it's still like, as long as that idea is being communicated, then I think it can be really strong anyway. So I think like as a facilitator, if you've got two people who are less comfortable with drawing, then I think you need to be able to say, look, it's okay for you to just like come up with a word or come up with a sentence, or just as long as it's clear to people who are looking at it. Yeah, I think it's really interesting doing it that way. You can also facilitate people talking about their ideas as well, right? Like, so, and ask the group who's listening to write down kind of questions. So you have a chance for kind of exchange of what exactly is this idea, to encourage more curiosity, encourage more questions, and to be able to like create more of a discussion around these ideas. Yeah, and another thing, and there's lots of different workshop techniques, but another thing you can do is to ask everybody to create like a flow or an idea. And then you can do what's called heat map voting. So instead of say, I'm going to vote for this idea or this idea, you can put a sticker on the specific part of an idea that you appreciate, and maybe bring ideas together to create a solution. Yeah, so there are workarounds to make people feel more comfortable, but it's interesting what you say around, making people feel comfortable and changing the mindset that we're all creators in this. It's not just the designers who are the creatives here, and it's not just the designers who should make these decisions. I think it's really important as well, and of course, when it comes to technical feasibility and creating something that we really can do, I think having those conversations at a super early ideation stage is really important, so we don't kind of go so far ahead that we realize actually this is going to take us a really long time to make a reality and get into the hands of our customers.
Very, very good. Makes sense, absolutely. Another question that came to my mind, which is a question that I always get and I cannot really answer, that what do you think, what is the right time for dealing with the UX design? Is it, I mean, probably there is no black and white answer for that, but because one very end would be that, okay, imagine the functionality, imagine all the features that you will have, and at the end you will make a skin for that. And the other end would be that, okay, have a fully perfect user interface design or user interaction design, and then fill it up with functionality. And probably the answer is in between, but how do you see the timing? So let's say that it's a greenfield project. So you are building a new app, a new business idea. That how does it usually starting?
Yeah, I think it might be another it depends answer, and it depends on the organization, and because sometimes you can start with, okay, maybe you come into an organization and you're starting fresh there, and there's already a backlog, there's already a bunch of ideas, and we need to kind of manage the process of taking this from an idea through some form of iteration and testing with customers, and being able to kind of come up with these solutions, test them and implement them. I think if you ask me my ideal process, it's always starting with market and customer research. So like connecting with customers on a more qualitative level, on a kind of one-to-one level, to maybe run interviews, run some user tests, any ways to kind of try and understand more about their current experience. And then through that, be able to highlight maybe opportunities for us to improve the product. So it might be we're user testing a specific flow, and there's a problem, or they come up with some kind of hurdle that they can't get over, or they struggle to get over. And typically, if we come up with that kind of solution or that kind of observation, we would use a severity rating. So we say, okay, like how big is this problem for our customer? Is it that they are unable to complete the task they're set out to do, which is of course a red? Is it that they've had troubles along the way? Maybe it's amber, or if they actually sailed through and everything's green. So I think that definitely helps us to identify the small usability challenges which we can help and iterate on over time. But I think it's always important to have a more generative research track as well. So that's using kind of larger scale research to be able to identify new opportunities. Maybe something, if you think about like using data analytics to inform these ideas as well. Like if you think of a typical conversion funnel, like, okay, maybe a customer starts at one point and then their end point is is here. And in order to do this, maybe they go through certain steps in your typical kind of conversion funnel. You can see them, some of them drop off here, some of them drop off here, some of them manage to complete, the percentage of the people who start here don't necessarily finish here. And trying to understand how like large scale behaviors are changing over time, I think can help us to understand maybe where some of the hiccups are in our user experience, and where to be able to kind of dig a level deeper into maybe more qualitative research, or even more quantitative research on specific questions that we want to answer. So I think that can really help. But for me, primarily connecting with customers just brings a huge amount of opportunity, and really highlights the things that are wrong, the pain points that we need to fix, but also the larger opportunities for how we can like improve our product experience moving forward as well.
Makes sense. What do you think? What is so obviously what is also the kind of the questions of this today's conversation is what will happen in the future. And that's what I want to ask. But before that, I want to ask that what has happened maybe in the last 10 years? So what is the kind of curve, or what is the path that user experience is moving on? And of course, then how it is going to be continuing?
Yeah, I think for me, user 10 years ago, I don't think user experience design was so much of a phrase even. Design was primarily seen as creating user interfaces that you interact with, and the idea of like interaction design was definitely a topic. But now I think design is seen, like you mentioned as well in your last chain conversation, that it's more about problem solving. Design is not the visual output, it's the creative process of problem solving, and solving problems that you have to dig to find out what those problems are in the first place. Like I mentioned, if say you connect with customers, if you do some user testing and you surface particular issues, then like, okay, what problem is this? What problem do we need to solve here as a collective group? And then to be able to go through that process. So I think for me, design and UX has changed from being primarily a visual, I wouldn't even say a visual art, but primarily a visual practice, to actually a more strategic problem solving process, which businesses can use to be able to, enhance their product, and to be able to enhance usability, and to be able to kind of grow and develop more as an organization as well. So I think maybe what I'm saying is the sphere of influence has changed from maybe a screen or a flow to actually the impact that you can have on an organization or a market or an industry can change and has grown over time.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, that's probably not a question, but the interesting is the level that I guess the usability of the applications that we use. Obviously 10 years ago there were no smartphones yet, I think, or maybe there were, I don't know, but anyway, so that has been improved. So I think that's clearly, but aren't we already good? So is it still a chance to further improve the usability, or is it something that, so what is going to be the future of that?
I don't think I know the answer to that one. I think usability can always be improved. Like, I don't think I've ever tested an application where it's been completely smooth sailing and there's been no opportunity for change. I think it's continuously evolving, but as well, industries continually evolve, and that's something we need to kind of stay ahead of the curve and see where things are going. Otherwise I don't think I know the answer really in terms of in terms of maybe a specific change. I think there's a growing number of touch points, I guess, like, maybe as you mentioned, the different platforms that we used to primarily have just, desktop website experiences, and now we have so many different devices, like, portable devices in our homes, are, our Google homes are like, all sorts of devices all over the place. And I think maybe that makes a difference as well. Like, we need to start considering a wider variety of technologies and connections, and make sure that we can, connect with different people on different touch points that are most relevant to them at that specific moment in time. if they're walking down the street, we need to be connecting them on their mobile phone. If they're in their kitchen, we need to be connecting with them maybe through their kitchen speaker. Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that one?
I was just thinking about the fashion, because I mean the fashion is also, there is no end. There is always changing. Sometimes in a circle, sometimes in really new things. So is it also something like that with the applications as well, so that that we users are somewhat needing some sort of renewal? It's not necessarily better or worse. Obviously, it should be always a little bit better, but different, just to be able to, I don't know, feel that we are working, we are operating with the today's things, or not feeling like that we are living in the past, or I don't know, just following some trend, or is it more like annoying for the people to that I always need to learn a new style, a new way of design? I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like on a human level that probably varies quite a lot. I certainly know people who are, even people who work in technology who will say, I don't want to be near technology for the next 5 days. Their holiday is a time to get away from technology. And there are other people who are just super into the next IoT device that comes out, and they just want to be connected and not feel like they're missing out on anything. There's this whole concept of like FOMO, right? The fear of missing out and feeling like, oh, I need to be connected all the time. Other people, and maybe people who have gone too far with that, will also say, you know what, I need some disconnection right now. So I feel like it varies per person, but it's a really interesting topic.
Yeah, I remember that when this hamburger icon was appearing first. I don't know which phone was it first appearing, but now you see it also on web pages on which, because I don't know, that's just somehow the notion of some being trendy, or I mean,
Exactly.
but of course, it's also a convenience thing for the user. So once you learn that, okay, if you see that icon, that just triggers something, that some purpose that you can do. So it's not only trend; it supports the functionality. But it's funny to see that, and maybe whatever, a few years ago there will be a new idea like that, and then it just goes spread.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I actually did some user testing with a menu icon once, because there was some skepticism in our team as to whether it really means anything to anyone. Hey, it's just 3 lines. Like, do people know what happens when you click on this? It was interesting as well. I mean, this was specifically an Android application. And actually, all people who were using Android just knew this menu. They knew exactly that it would bring in the panel from the side, and it was just a normal kind of a normal function that they were really used to. But it's really fascinating as well, the difference between Android or iOS or web, and all those differences. The difference in interaction patterns, and how, like, for me, I'm used to using Android day to day. I have an iPhone as well, but when I switch between the two, I kind of have to relearn how to use these different platforms, and it's really interesting. What platforms do you normally work with?
Android. I mean, I work with. I don't work directly on mobile platforms, so what I use Android.
You use
That's
Android,
yeah. So I've seen that you are also doing such kind of design workshops with children as well, and I'm really. I also have 3 children, and I'm always interested in how to get them involved in these kind of things. So I would be also glad to hear something about how that works, and what is what kind of things you can achieve with children, and how does it look like?
In terms of what you can achieve, so much more than you would ever imagine, actually. Like, they're incredibly creative, like more creative than any of us adults allow ourselves to be, which is definitely like the biggest learning that I've had from working with them. And this is teaching children anywhere from kind of 5 years old to, I think, like 15 is probably, like 15, 16 is probably the oldest. But mainly the younger group, so mainly kind of maybe 6 to 10 years. And it's really, really fascinating. So the organization is called Future Legends. And it's an organization based here in Berlin, where we offer primarily design thinking. I specifically offer design thinking workshops. There's actually different tracks. So some around, like, there's workshops on robotics, some on leadership skills, some in design, software engineering. So there's a lot of different tracks within Future Legends, but I'm primarily working in the design track. So that's like working with a really nice group of people who all volunteer their time to create these curriculums and to teach on a Saturday. Yeah, and it's really interesting. We've done various different concepts, primarily around like design thinking, and we kind of think of design thinking as a life skill, and that design thinking is purely a problem-solving technique. It's understanding first of all what the problem is, defining what that problem is, coming up with ideas, choosing an idea, testing it, and then iterating on it and becoming and going through that process. And I think it's a solution. It's a process that you can take for any kind of problem solving technique along the way. So yeah, we've designed the ultimate school, where they've had different cards for different teachers, and these teachers have different challenges that they have as a teacher, and they need a classroom or a space which is going to fit all of their needs. So for instance, we ran one around the ultimate school, and the one of the children was creating a classroom for a history teacher, and came up with a time capsule, where the students would go into the time capsule and actually like travel back in time to be able to live in that space and to be able to come back. So like they're really creative, come up with really interesting ideas. One of them was designing for a PE teacher, and they created this like swimming pool, which was on, from the bottom room, you could look up and see the swimming pool above you, all sorts of slides, crazy stuff going on. But yeah, it's really, really interesting using design thinking as a process to kind of inspire creativity in kids. And I think, that definitely the main thing I've learned from teaching kids, and actually it's the same running workshops with adults, is that it's really, really important to just like keep things simple, do as little kind of lecturing and talking as possible, and just be as kind of hands-on and fun as you can, and they seem to really enjoy it. But yeah, you said that you're teaching your kids some software engineering right now.
Yeah, I mean that's what I can teach them for, but
that's great.
So mine are also in this age group, so 6, 8, and 10.
Perfect.
And I also see that. I mean, maybe in software development you need a little more time until you can better show your creativity, because there are a lot of things which are a little bit far from what you are normally doing. I mean, also finding a good metaphor, whatever else, those kind of things were there. But whenever they do their hands-on work with paper, I see that sometimes they are just going away and they are coming with such a fantastic ideas, and even the 5 or 6 year old can come up with a new idea, and it's pretty amazing what kind of things they can do if you just let them, give them enough things, and maybe just a small hint that okay, this is the topic, and for that. But also this time capsule is a very interesting thing. One of my daughter likes to read this some kind of history related books, and there are such books which are just putting you into that, so putting some today's characters into that history, and then you as a child, you can better imagine that, okay, what would be the situation there, and that's a much nice way of learning. I also remember that one of my best book that I used to learn about history was a history related book, but it was a normal story. It was just in that situation, and of course all those characters who were involved, and I could better imagine that how it would be, because if you just look at the normal school book about history, then that's too far to be empathic about the situation, and then it just doesn't trigger the creativity that
exactly. Yeah, I think that's it. It's probably a nice segue to the next conversation I'll have as well about empathy and creating empathy to be able to design something that's more specifically built for somebody, created for somebody.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you. Thanks very much for the conversation.
For the rest.
Yeah, I will do. Have a lovely day.